Welcome everyone, Friday afternoon, and I'm really delighted to be here to have this opportunity and make sure I don't talk to the lights, don't go out and we're stuck here. Yeah, I'm a learning designer. I worked at LSHTM for many years, and then at the beginning of 2021 moved to Ireland and live in Dublin now. Guinness is as good as they say. Yep. So look me up if you're ever over. I'd love to go for a pint. And I took a job as a remote consultant as a learning designer with the World Health Organization's Academy, which was a new initiative. And so that was my very first experience of, take a while. There we go. Very first experience of integrating gamification into learning design. So it's, so what I hope you'll get from this session is that it was kind of a messy experience, but I am going to share kind of my, basically a bit about the context, what we did, the course, how the course kind of came out, and then my reflections on three key themes about the experience of integrating gamification. And I hope no matter where you are in your own gamification journey, you can have one or two takeaways at least that you might apply to your own practice. So that's why I'm here, and I hope it's useful. Yes, please. Just not having it. Still at lunch.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
So, and a bit more broadly, why it might be important is it's been around for sort of 10 or 15 years, I think, digital gamification in education. And it is quite a popular design approach. And at a sort of top level, the educational research findings on it is pretty positive about its effect on motivation, engagement, and performance, sometimes performance. But I would argue that it's still quite complicated to implement. It's very context dependent, where you're working and who your learners are and all these sort of things. And I would argue that the evidence itself is pretty surfacey level. It's not very deep. It's not really looking at the detail of what's going on. So that's kind of some of the stuff I'm going to get into, hopefully. If I can figure out how to move things along. There we go. Cool. So just so we're all on the same page, gamification is generally defined as use of game design elements within a non-game context. So that's why it's different from gaming, basically. So it could be business, health, you know, your wearable app, or you're trying to buy a train ticket or something, you're having points thrown at you no matter what. And in education, it's generally seen, welcome, generally seen as an approach for encouraging learners' motivation and engagement. And that theme of motivation was a big one for me in my experience. Doesn't seem to be a standard set of common design elements that are applied when courses are gamified or learning is gamified, but these were the ones that came up in the research and the literature reviews and stuff. Those first 3 points, progress, leaderboards, and badges, all closely relate to treating achievement as the motivation for learners to engage. So, and those are by far the most common elements implemented. But I would say to you that it's, and this will come up later, it's really worth, it's not the only motivation to engage in gamification. So for example, you've got storytelling, collaboration, feedback. Of course, these are core things in many of the much of the learning design we do. So it's a messy field, is what I'm saying. I would also actually, before we carry on, I would say this issue of motivation. In my previous work, before you know, treating gamification, motivation came in as part of self-regulation in the context I work in, adult professional learning mostly. So thinking about how to support learners to be more self-motivated to engage in the learning, or maybe what behavioural nudges we can do, or what's in the environment around them, maybe other learners that can help them. So I haven't teased it apart in this talk, but I think there's something in this real focus of gamification, which I think comes a lot from business and how it ties together or doesn't with learning and motivation for learning. So, right. So the context I was working in, they let me stop leaping about like a leprechaun. There's no Irish people here, are they? I've just insulted everyone. Apologies. You can't take the Brit out of Britain. So, so the context I was working in, yes, as I said, it was for the World Health Organization Academy, which is a pretty recent initiative at the WHO. And they're bringing all their training provision together. They have this huge noble goal to close the global health training gap for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it was a sort of a startup culture that brought a lot of people together all around the world. We were all working remotely. And because it was early days, I joined in 2021, we had a much smaller initial objective, which was the early release of about 30 self-directed, individual, self-paced online courses in the 6 UN languages on their bespoke learning platform. So kind of, to be completely honest, fancy MOOCs. So we had but beyond that, they were doing a lot of strategizing and developing their vision. They're focused on behavior change. They were adopting a competency-based approach, which of course was far beyond what we were doing, but we were involved in mapping our objectives to behaviors and competencies. They were looking at lifelong micro-credentials as part of lifelong learning, and building their own bespoke learning management system, which is massive. And they were also developing quite a rigorous quality by design process, which had about 9 stage gates. So as a learning designer going in, there was quite a lot of support. Once the courses were approved, they came to you, you worked with the subject matter experts from the relevant departments to come up with the sort of the goal, the outcome, the objectives, the target learners, that sort of thing. That would be checked. Then you do the mapping, that would be checked. Then you do the objectives and structure, and it was checked all the way through. So there was quite a lot of support. And the last element they were very focused on was innovation, and that's get back to gamification. That's where the gamification came in. So it was seen as an innovative and I think probably a cool new approach, which is maybe a bit of a warning sign. So I'm going to my last Irish reference. Apologies to the lady at the back. There's a great saying I've come across, which is, I wouldn't start from here. And I think maybe you could take that away from this experience I'm about to share. So I'm going to skip through this in the interest of time. We're encouraged to integrate gamification into the design of all the courses we were working on. And this is the course I'm going to talk about. This is the one where you integrated most gamification elements. So it's called Counselling and Prescribing Contraception in Pharmacies. The main objective of the course was learning how to counsel, inform and assist clients who presented to you in the pharmacy or the drugstore on assisting them with an appropriate form of self-care contraception. Target learners were early career pharmacists and drugstore counter staff. They could be any pharmacy or drugstore around the world. So it's absolutely enormous target learner set. And the basic structure was 6 scenario-based role plays where you kind of took the role of the pharmacist and supported a presenting client. On the right, you can see Ada, who's looking for emergency contraception. So in terms of gamification elements, and I would say when we started integrating the gamification, the learning design was largely in place. And I think that was a problem. So in terms of gamification elements, you can see we have a learning pathway at the start, and we have some unlocks. So you kind of unlock access to role play. On the right, you can see a mission. That was another element in the ones I showed. So this is your mission to support Ada with emergency contraception. You were sent to the learning objectives, and then you were into the role play. We did actually, I haven't shared it, we did explain how to play the game, if you like, before you took the first role play. And then the role plays worked, you get a little bit of animation, maybe 10 to 20 seconds. Here you can see Ada is approaching the counter, and then we would stop. And we might have some learning activities. You might be asked to go and look for a resource on where we got to with the role play, or we might explore something about the contraceptive method. But we also had about 15 decision judgment points where we were asked to use single best answer, and we asked you to make your best judgment on what to do next or what you had just seen. And these we scored. So we used the points, a game element. And each of these are mapped to learning objectives, mapped to behaviors, mapped to competencies. You make your answer, you get your points and your feedback about how you've done, and you proceed on through the role play. At the end of the role play, you get your score, and you're encouraged to relate that to the maximum points that could be scored. So you could maybe start to see some of the gaps. I should say we did have also some self-reflection and practice-based points where we wanted you to relate this big global learning to your own local context, what were the local protocols you're using, how you might start to put things into practice. So I should say it wasn't just me and the subject matter expert. We had a games expert advising us. There was a visual design person. The quality team, as I've said, was quite involved. There was also an e-learning vendor involved. So we took the design storyboards to. So there was quite a big team and a lot of expertise to get this design, and it got through quality control, got through functions, off it went, and it was released about just over a year ago. But at that point, as a learning designer, my role ended, which was a bit sad. I'm not used to it. In HE, you get to stay involved with the course. So I never got to see what the data was about the engagement from the learners or the metrics on the platform. And then I left the academy. 4 years of remote working. I needed to see some sunshine. So that was it for me. So that left me with the feeling that I just had questions about the gamification, which I've got here. And this conference, I was so honoured to be able to speak because it gave me the opportunity to go back to the literature, have a look at what's being said in the educational literature about gamification and answer some of the questions I had, basically. So how on earth are we going to know if this gamification worked? And what was about this issue of motivation? We kind of assumed they were going to like our early career pharmacists were going to enjoy scoring points. Is that true? And I made some big assumptions there. And how could I get better in the future? So we're not too far off time. It's all. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll just talk about what I found in the literature, how I related it to my experience and sort of take forwards. And I hope bits of it are of value to you. So with the measurement, how to know if it worked? Well, with the academy in a sort of startup phase, they had it's quite light touch, the evaluation. So they had a short post-course questionnaire with 3 questions that learners could share their views on. Did it help motivate them? Did it help them engage more? And did it help them transfer their learning into practice? Which I thought was quite a stretch asking for that. And we also had completion metrics. So the way the learning worked, it was created as in Articulate, and scoring packages were uploaded to the e-learning platform, but the learning records system wasn't advanced enough to capture engagement metrics. So what people were answering for the decision points. So it's just whether or not they got through it. So we're not really going to get a huge amount of information from that approach. When I went to the literature, of course, the literature reviewers are all wanting experiments, quasi-experiments, case controls. Great, I can advocate for that going forward as a learning designer, but it won't be in my remit. But they also were very keen on this capturing the engagement metrics, so that with your formative assessments or your gamification actions, you're seeing what the learners are doing in response to what you've designed. And also, when we document that as part of our design work, mapping that to our design decisions. So we chose points, and therefore we want this. Our motivation is achievement, and we want the learner to get a sense of achievement. And so are we able to see that in the learner's journey through the metrics? So that really clarified a lot for me. And then it sounded really obvious, and I felt really didn't. So, but sometimes you have to learn by doing, right? And then this box on the right is just a really interesting paper that, particularly if you're doing learning design around behavior change. So you're wanting somebody to go through your learning experience and change the world. It's a really interesting paper. It talks about applying evidence-based behavior techniques that have been mapped out. Susan Mitchell from UCL has done a lot of work on that. And a lot of that relates to some of the self-regulation techniques that I know there's a lot of literature on. So goal setting, for example. So there's a big overlap. So as a learning designer, that's just like, oh, lots of different things we could try in the design. Really exciting. In terms of motivation, I think I'm starting to get a really uneasy feeling in the literature now. So I'll talk about my experience about how much attention we paid. So the academy is in some ways very forward thinking. They're very focused on taking a user-centered approach. It comes a lot from business about the design principles. So we use things like personas. We try and design materials that's from the learner's perspective, hence the role plays, things like that. But there was a gap around self-regulation. I think we I would love to. I've got a friend who's still there. I'm love to chat to her about where we were with that. And then in terms of the games design, when I went to look at the literature from gamification research, there's this huge emphasis on clearly identifying the motivation you're trying to engender with your design. And I started to think, you know, it wasn't enough quality by design process. Our games design process was quite loose. I don't think we spent enough time on that. So, for example, you can tell that we went for achievement through points, but there's all sorts of other motivations. Empowerment. The learner is going to be, you know, they're on a journey towards being able to do something they could never do before. There's epic meaning through storytelling. So we do have stories in this course. We could have really leveraged those stories, you know, and used branching and role playing, and, you know, driven the short story could have changed if that had been our decision. We just hadn't teased it out enough. Then finally, because these are big international courses with learners from different organizations, different countries, different rural, urban, there's this lot of work happening in human-computer interaction, well, coming from sociology and from self-regulation work, but now in human-computer interaction and learning analytics, and maybe in learning design, and I just haven't seen it, about taking account of organizational influences, so or cultural patterns, about what motivates you as a learner to engage with anything to do with interaction with a computer in mind, in this case, gamification. And there's a sense that we're not paying enough attention to those factors. So gamification research at the moment is very focused on sort of personality types. You'll see a lot of like, are your learners achievers? Are they into social relatedness? And it's very limited. But there's a big, wide, complicated world out there, especially if you're looking at this large scale with your open courses, you should be looking at. And the stuff I'll skip on at a furious pace, but the stuff on the box on the right, the white box, is really interesting work on the Viberg et al. Paper about taking a value-sensitive perspective. So it's beyond the single project. I would say it's an institutional level, where you start to nail your colours to the mast about your values. So we talk a lot about equity and diversity and inclusion, but what does that mean? How do we define it? Is it true for all of our learners? Do they also value these things? And once you've mapped it, do we want to start bringing cultures together? Or is it more, I don't know what the word is, equitable to respect different values and cultures and design for that? So, and I see all of that value stuff as quite related to the motivation stuff. So anyway, super interesting, probably won't implement anything, gonna keep reading the research. And then finally, my final point, frameworks. This is really the practical stuff. How will I get better at this gamification design practice in future? So I should say that when we released the course, it was well received at the Academy. It was seen as a good course. The department was happy with it, quality were happy with it. It worked well, I mean, it was good. I just had a sense as a learning designer that the gamification kind of sat on top of the learning design, and it didn't really drive the learner forward. That motivation element was kind of missing. So when I went to the literature, all over it, everybody's saying, use a design framework, a gamification design framework. And we hadn't. We had used quite a robust quality by design process, but it's thinking about learning, not motivation, not gamification. We had a games expert who was fantastic. They were working 2 days a week. They had 30 courses to talk to. So they really did try and help us, but it was quite limited, the interaction we had with that person. So when I went off and looked at them, I found this one called 6D, which was designed for business. It's about 15 years old. I saw that it rated quite highly in this comparison network. And so it seemed quite complete, with quite a lot of the decisions we have to make as designers. And it's got these 6 steps, which map quite nicely to quite a standard approach to learning design. I felt, what are your objectives? What behaviors are you after? For a competency-based place that I'm based in. Describe your players, who are your learners? What activity loops are you going to decide? So what are the learning activities? Don't forget the fun. I think we may have forgotten that. And what are the tools? So what I did, and I think I am running a bit short in time now, was I went through the 6 stages and each step of the 6th stage, and I thought about the design process we'd gone through. And what became really clear was I was the learning designer. I had conflated learning design and gamification design. And gamification design used to sit at down that level at the activity. So clearly identified your motivation. You think about the activity that's how you're going to prompt them to engage in that learning activity, and then how you're going to reward them. And you have to do it at that micro level all the way through. So we had been under a lot of timeline pressure. We had just neglected to do that. So that's don't start from where I started. Start from here and do it earlier. Right, I'm over time. Thank you, Leonard. So yeah.
We have a little extra time.
Oh, okay.
So, but
I won't take up too much, but it's too selfish. So yes, so I should say I think co-creation and co-design super powerful here for addressing some of those elements. What are your learners' intrinsic motivations? Exactly. When you get to designing the activity loops, are they fun? I'm a terrible person. I'm 54 years old. I'm trying to design for 25-year-olds. Let's get them involved. So, and I should say, at the academy, the departments they come in for the content and then they disappear again. So there are, some really nice talks today about academics who are involved all the way through. In this context, it was different. I'll just skip ahead to so those are my 3 takeaways. So like, use a gamification framework. Don't forget your quality by design process. Do it as early as possible. It will influence your learning design. Focus on your learner motivations. It just informs the whole design, and bake in that measurement approach towards improved engagement, towards improved outcomes. So it's all kind of like, oh yeah, I knew all of that. But in the heat of the design, those are the things that were missing. So I hope some of that was useful. I'm really happy for any comments or questions. Thank you very much.